On the tropical islands of the Philippines, where towering mountains meet the Azure Sea, a tale of rebellion, resilience, and the fight for freedom once unfolded. This is the story of the longest revolt in Philippine history, the Dagohoy Rebellion. A struggle that spanned nearly a century, where the determination of a single man sparked a flame that would burn bright for 85 long years. Today, we delve deep into the annals of history to uncover the saga of Francisco Dagohoy and the Boholanos who stood their ground against Spanish colonial rule. Chapter 1. The setting: Bohol in the 18th century. Before we dive into the heart of the rebellion, let's set the stage. The year is 1744. We are in the Spanish colonial Philippines, an archipelago that has been under the yoke of Spanish rule since the mid-16th century. Bohol, a small island in the Visayas, was known for its beautiful landscapes, with its rolling hills, dense forests, and winding rivers. But behind this picturesque setting lay a populace growing increasingly discontented with the oppressive policies of the Spanish colonizers. The people of Bohol, like many other Filipinos during this time, were subject to the encomienda system, a form of forced labor imposed by the Spanish crown. Under this system, the local inhabitants, or indios, as the Spaniards called them, were compelled to pay tribute in the form of labor, crops, and goods. They were also required to adhere to Catholicism, the religion imposed upon them by the Spanish missionaries who sought to convert the indigenous population. It was a time of great hardship, where the Spaniards wielded their power with an iron fist. The friars, particularly the Jesuits who had a strong presence in Bohol, played a significant role in the day-to-day governance of the island, often blurring the lines between spiritual and temporal authority. Chapter 2. The Spark: The Death of Sagrario Dagohoy. Enter Francisco Dagohoy, born Francisco Sendrias, a native of Bohol and a man of strong character. He was the chief of his village and a man of unwavering principles. But as the Spanish grip tightened, so too did the tensions between the colonizers and the local populace. The spark that ignited the Dagohoy Rebellion was deeply personal and tragic. Dagohoy had a brother named Sagrario, a man who, like many Boholanos, was conscripted into the local militia. Sagrario was a faithful Catholic, as was expected by the Spanish authorities, and his duties often involved dealing with the lawlessness that occasionally erupted in the region. One day, Sagrario was tasked with apprehending a fugitive, but in the ensuing struggle, he lost his life. His body was brought back to the village, where the grieving Dagohoy sought to give his brother a proper Christian burial. However, the local Jesuit priest, who had long been at odds with the Sendrias family, refused to administer the last rites and bury Sagrario in consecrated ground, citing the fact that he had died in a duel, a mortal sin according to Catholic doctrine. This refusal was more than just an act of cruelty. It was a deep insult to Dagohoy and his family. To deny someone a Christian burial was to condemn their soul to eternal damnation, and for Dagohoy, this was an unforgivable offense. Chapter 3. The revolt begins 1744. Fueled by a desire for justice and a growing resentment towards Spanish rule, Francisco Dagohoy decided that enough was enough. He gathered his fellow villagers and spoke of rebellion. His message was simple: the time had come to throw off the chains of Spanish oppression. The Boholanos, who had long suffered under Spanish rule, were more than willing to join Dagohoy. His personal grievance became a rallying cry for the masses. The rebellion officially began in 1744, and Dagohoy quickly established himself as the leader of the uprising. He and his followers took to the mountains of Bohol, where they set up a fortified camp deep in the dense forests, far from the reach of Spanish authorities. Dagohoy's first act was to exact revenge on the Jesuit priest who had denied his brother a Christian burial. This act of defiance sent a clear message to the Spanish authorities: the Boholanos would no longer be subjugated. Soon, more people from nearby towns and villages joined the rebellion, and Dagohoy's forces swelled to several thousand. The initial success of the rebellion was swift and brutal. The Boholanos, under Dagohoy's leadership, managed to drive the Spaniards out of large portions of Bohol, effectively creating a liberated zone where Spanish authority was non-existent. The Spanish colonial government in Manila was caught off guard by the scale and ferocity of the uprising. They had underestimated the resolve of Dagohoy and his followers. Chapter 4. The Long Struggle 1744–1829. While the rebellion had begun with a single act of defiance, it soon evolved into a prolonged struggle that would last for 85 years. Throughout this period, the Spanish colonial government made numerous attempts to quash the rebellion. Several governors-general sent expeditions to Bohol, but each time, Dagohoy and his forces managed to repel the invaders. The Boholanos' knowledge of the local terrain gave them a significant advantage. They utilized guerrilla tactics, launching surprise attacks on Spanish forces before retreating into the mountains where they were virtually impossible to pursue. Dagohoy himself became a legend, with stories of his cunning and bravery spreading across the archipelago. Despite their best efforts, the Spanish were unable to fully subdue the rebellion. The Jesuits, who were particularly hated by the Boholanos, were eventually expelled from the Philippines in 1768, partly due to their failure to quell the unrest in Bohol. However, the rebellion continued even after their departure. Dagohoy's leadership was not just about military strategy. He also established a functioning government in the areas under his control. The Boholanos created their own independent community, with Dagohoy at its helm. This proto-republic operated for decades, demonstrating the capability and resolve of the local population to govern themselves free from Spanish interference. Chapter 5. The End of the Rebellion 1829. But all revolutions, no matter how righteous, must eventually come to an end. By the early 19th century, the Dagohoy Rebellion had begun to wane. Francisco Dagohoy himself had long passed, but the spirit of his rebellion lived on in his successors. However, the Spanish colonial government was relentless, and after decades of failed attempts, they finally managed to gather enough resources and manpower to mount a decisive campaign. In 1829, after a series of bloody battles and a prolonged siege, the Spanish forces were able to break through the defenses of the Boholanos. The rebellion, which had once seemed invincible, was now crumbling. The final stronghold of Dagohoy's followers was captured, and the remaining rebels were either killed, captured, or forced to surrender. Those who were captured were offered amnesty by the Spanish government on the condition that they swear allegiance to the Spanish crown. Many accepted, exhausted by the long years of struggle. However, the legacy of Francisco Dagohoy and his rebellion was far from forgotten. Chapter 6. The Legacy of Dagohoy. Although the rebellion was eventually quelled, the impact of Dagohoy's resistance was profound. The Dagohoy Rebellion remains the longest-lasting revolt in Philippine history, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Boholanos. Francisco Dagohoy is remembered as a hero, not just in Bohol but throughout the Philippines. His defiance against Spanish colonial rule inspired future generations of Filipinos in their own struggles for independence. Today, Dagohoy's name is etched in the annals of Philippine history, and his legacy lives on in the hearts of those who continue to fight for freedom and justice. Monuments and historical markers have been erected in his honor, serving as a reminder of the resilience and courage that he embodied. The story of Francisco Dagohoy and the Boholanos is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit in the face of tyranny. It is a story of how one man's personal grief transformed into a struggle for collective liberation. As we reflect on the history of the Philippines, the Dagohoy Rebellion stands out as a shining example of the enduring quest for freedom. So the next time you find yourself in the heart of Bohol, remember the man who dared to stand up against an empire and, for 85 long years, kept the flame of resistance burning bright. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to learn more about the history of the Philippines, make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss our next deep dive into history. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep questioning the world around you.